I'm sketching a lapwing today, and while I'm doing my initial sketch, let me tell you a few things about this interesting bird. So these birds are common in Europe and Asia, and they are insect eaters. They have this interesting head crest that you will see in a minute, actually quite beautiful birds, and they search for food, for insects on the ground, and they do that in meadows and on fields and on wet meadows. And they also breed on the ground, so this is often a problem when they breed on fields and come into contact with the heavy machinery of farmers. So they're near threatened on the red list. There's also another name for the lapwing, which is peewit, and this is actually close to their call. And what I find interesting that in German you have, so in German this bird is called a kibitz, and this sound that they make was in old German folk tales was interpreted, this kiwit or peewit, as come mit, so come with me, and this was interpreted as a sign of death that was calling people to come with him. And this is the kind of stuff that you can learn from old folk tales. You can see I'm well through my sketch. I have already laid in the body, the head and the wing with a few details, and now I'm working on the feet. So the feet are hidden by the grass. And I'm really looking forward to painting this because this bird has a really beautiful plumage. So the wings and a lot of the back is in this iridescent color changing tone, and it's really beautiful to paint. So I'm getting out my watercolors and I'm starting with the area around the tail, which is this yellow orangey tone. I'm just laying in the first layer of my iridescent color changing layer. So these are really bright colors, and this will look almost a bit too garish, a bit too bright, but it will all come together in the end. So I'm working in different greens, different blues, just very loose blobs of color, a little bit of violet here. So I think this was actually purple, quinacridone purple. And as this is drying, I'm working on the dark areas on the breast of the bird and continuing into the face. I'm also painting in the eye. And now the head crest. So they have this really cool, punky head crest. And so a lot of this bird is this interesting contrast between black and white and then these color changing feathers on the back and on the wings. I'm already adding a bit of my dark brown. So this is a gray brown that I mixed from sepia and from neutral gray. And now I'm painting in the tail with a few loose strokes in black. So the tail and these areas in the face and on the breast are black. And actually the wings are also black, but depending on how the light hits them, you can see more or less of this iridescent shine that I'm painting in here. So essentially this is a black and white bird with a few extra features. You can see I'm grabbing my brush in the middle so that, and when I want more detail, then I'm holding it at the front. So depending on how much of a loose brush stroke that I want, I can decide this by grabbing my brush in different places. So I'm adding a bit more dark on the back, in the shoulder area. And now I'm working on these intense colors a bit more. I'm adding a bit of shadow in the belly area and in the face. And with a bit of potter's pink, so I added this half pen of potter's pink to my palette recently, and this is just to use it up and to find out if I want this in my palette or not. And I'm using this for the feet. Also adding in a few grassy patches around the feet, so you can see the feet are covered up by this grass. And I'm adding a second layer around the face to make this a bit darker. So as you know, if you've watched some of my videos, I like to work with grays instead of blacks. So this often means that I have to go over my dark areas for a second time, for a second layer. But I really like to work that way. And now I'm working on really fleshing out the wing, making it look like a round shape instead of just a painted patch. So in the neck there's this brownish gray area, and I'm mixing in raw sienna for this. I'm also using this tone for the shadow areas on the feet and on the legs. I'm adding in more green, so this is actually phthalo green and sap green, so really intense greens. And I'm adding a bit more of these shadows around the eyes, around the beak. And I mean, come on, you can't imagine this little bird to be Death himself, can't you? Even though he says pewit, commit. I'm adding back in a bit of the violet that I lost earlier, and I'm still intensifying my green with a bit of yellow, a bit of phthalo green. And actually the tail feathers have this changing effect too, so I'm adding more of that there too. I'm using colored pencils, as I often like to do. So this is a middle brown that I add on the feet. And I'm also using this dark green on the wings. And a bit of yellow. And I'm working with my brush here and there to refine the colors a bit more. When you're working with colored pencils, then make sure that the area below has really dried, or else you will just scrub out the paint layers that you just painted in. And the last thing to add is a bit more of that shadow on the belly. And just a few strokes around the face. If you've enjoyed this video, then check out my video class How to Draw Birds. In this video series, I show you everything you need to get started when drawing birds in your sketchbook. I go over the basics of bird anatomy, show drawing techniques and tips, and give several demonstrations in pencil and watercolor from start to finish. The whole course has almost 2 hours of video. So come with me and learn how to draw birds.